My name is Paige, and at 31, I finally achieved what I thought was the ultimate symbol of my independence. My own beautiful apartment in Seattle with a breathtaking view of Puget Sound. After years of hard work as a graphic designer, this space was supposed to be my sanctuary. But I never expected my own parents to turn my housewarming celebration into a battlefield of boundaries. Before I dive into how my parents managed to ruin what should have been the proudest moment of my adult life, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had to fight for your independence. Growing up in Millfield, a small town in Ohio, where everyone knew your business before you did, I always felt suffocated. As the middle child between my overachieving older brother James and my people-pleasing younger sister Tara, I struggled to carve out my own identity. My parents, Harold and Meredith Wilson, had their lives planned out meticulously, and they expected nothing less from their children. Harold, a successful accountant at the town's largest firm, believed that financial stability trumped everything else. Meredith, a high school English teacher, valued tradition and family reputation above all. Together, they created a household where deviating from their expectations wasn't an option. From an early age, I showed artistic talent. When other kids were playing with dolls, I was sketching landscapes and creating elaborate drawings that my art teachers praised. My parents tolerated this as a cute hobby, but made it clear that art wasn't a viable career path. "Artists starve, Paige," my father would say whenever I mentioned pursuing design in college. "You need something practical, something with benefits and retirement plans." Despite their disapproval, I applied for and received a partial scholarship to attend the School of Visual Arts in Seattle. The night I told my parents, the kitchen became a war zone. "Seattle? That's across the country," my mother said, her voice trembling. "And for what? To draw pictures? This is ridiculous." My father was more direct. "We're not paying for this nonsense, Paige. If you want to throw away your future on doodles, you'll do it without our support." Their ultimatum was clear: attend the state college near home for business administration, or I was on my own. At 18, with nothing but determination and my scholarship, I chose independence. I packed 2 suitcases, emptied my modest savings account, and boarded a plane to Seattle. Those first years were brutal. I lived in a tiny studio apartment with 3 other art students waiting tables at a local diner to supplement my scholarship. My parents' communication dwindled to obligatory holiday calls where they'd ask when I was coming to my senses and returning home. But Seattle felt like freedom. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued creativity and expression. My professors recognized my talent in graphic design, and by junior year, I was freelancing for small local businesses. After graduation, I secured an entry-level position at a marketing agency. The pay was modest, but it was in my field. Meanwhile, I continued building my freelance portfolio, often working until 2 a.m. after my day job. It was during this hustle period that I met the friends who would become my Seattle family. Natalie, a copywriter with a wicked sense of humor, became my creative collaborator and eventual best friend. Jackson, a web developer with an uncanny ability to solve any technical problem, joined our professional network, and soon our personal one. Drew, Natalie's roommate, and a local chef completed our core group, often feeding us during late-night work sessions. 3 years after graduation, I had enough clients to leave my agency job and start my own design studio. The risk paid off, and within 2 years, my client list included several recognizable Seattle businesses and even a few national brands. My parents' attitude shifted subtly as my success grew. Suddenly, they were mentioning "my daughter the designer" to their friends, though our actual relationship remained strained and distant. Our conversations still felt like navigating a minefield, with them questioning every decision I made. When I called to tell them I was buying an apartment, my father's first response was, "Are you sure that's wise? The market could crash any day now." My mother chimed in, "Wouldn't renting give you more flexibility when you decide to move back home?" After 7 years, they still couldn't accept that Seattle was my home now. The apartment hunting process took 6 months. I wanted something that truly reflected me, a space where I could both live and work comfortably. When I found the 2-bedroom unit on the 14th floor of a renovated building in Capitol Hill, I knew immediately it was mine. Floor-to-ceiling windows filled the space with natural light perfect for my work. The open concept living area gave me room to breathe. The second bedroom would make an ideal home office, and the balcony, though small, offered a view of Puget Sound that made my heart race every time I looked out. The day I signed the closing papers, I sat alone on the empty floor of my new home, crying happy tears. This place represented every boundary I'd established every time I'd chosen myself, despite my parents' disapproval. It was tangible proof that I'd made the right decisions. I spent weeks personalizing the space. The walls were adorned with artwork from local artists I admired, and a few of my own pieces. The furniture was an eclectic mix of mid-century modern finds and contemporary pieces. My home office featured a custom-built desk that Jackson helped me design, positioned perfectly to capture the natural light. When everything was finally in place, I decided to host a housewarming party. It would be a celebration not just of my new home, but of the life and community I'd built in Seattle. I hesitated before inviting my parents. We'd settled into a rhythm of strained politeness over the years, with brief visits every couple of years that always ended in tension. But this milestone felt significant enough to warrant an invitation, and part of me hoped that seeing my success firsthand might finally earn their respect. When I called to invite them, I carefully set expectations. The party is on Saturday, June 12th. It's nothing fancy, just drinks and appetizers with friends, I explained. I've booked you a room at the hotel down the street for Saturday night. A hotel? That's silly, my mother responded. We'll just stay with you. You have a guest room now, right? I do, but it's also my office, and honestly, I think we'd all be more comfortable with some space. I insisted, already feeling the familiar tightness in my chest that appeared whenever I tried to establish boundaries with them. Well, we'll see when we get there, she said dismissively. We're so excited to finally see this place you've been talking about. I ended the call feeling uneasy, but tried to focus on the positive. This was my celebration in my space with my chosen family. I could handle my parents for one evening. What I didn't expect was the text I received a week before the party. Good news, we managed to get an earlier flight. We'll arrive Friday afternoon instead of Saturday morning. Can't wait to see you in your new place. Just like that, my carefully planned weekend began to unravel. The moment my parents walked through my door, I knew I'd made a mistake in inviting them. My mother, Meredith, didn't even greet me properly before her critical eye was scanning my living room. Oh, Paige, she said with a slight grimace. It's so modern. Don't you think something more traditional would have better resale value? My father Harold was busy examining the light fixtures. These must be running up your electricity bill. Have you looked into more efficient options? I hadn't seen them in nearly 2 years, and this was how they chose to reconnect. No congratulations on my achievement, no acknowledgement of how far I'd come. It's nice to see you too, I said, trying to keep my tone light. How was your flight? They barely registered the question as they continued their inspection tour of my home. My mother ran her finger along my bookshelf, checking for dust, while my father pulled out his phone to calculate the square footage cost. We should have helped you shop for furniture, my mother said, sinking onto my sofa with obvious disapproval. This doesn't look very comfortable. I love my furniture, I replied, already feeling defensive in my own home. Everything was chosen specifically to match my aesthetic and needs. Your aesthetic, my father repeated with air quotes. That's a luxury, Paige. Practical considerations should come first. Before I could respond, my mother was standing in front of my gallery wall, tisking at my collection of local art. Wouldn't family photos be nicer I brought some we could frame? It would make the place feel more like home. This is my home, I said firmly, and it already feels exactly the way I want it to. The tension was momentarily interrupted when my mother spotted the second bedroom. "Oh, this must be our room for the weekend," she said, already walking in. "Actually, that's my office," I explained, following her. "I've booked you a hotel room down the street. Remember our call? You'll be more comfortable there, and I need this space for work." My mother's face fell into a familiar expression of hurt that I knew was at least partly tactical. "You'd send your own parents to a hotel after we came all this way to see you." My father joined the conversation. "That's ridiculous. We're not staying in a hotel when you have a perfectly good room right here." "I work from home," I explained, trying to remain calm. "This is my office. I have client meetings via video call. I need this space." "You can work at the kitchen table for a couple of days," my father dismissed. "Family comes first, Paige." Before I could protest further, they were unzipping their suitcases on my office floor. Just like that, my boundary had been trampled, and we were falling back into old patterns. That evening, I took them to a restaurant nearby, hoping neutral territory might ease the tension. I was wrong. "So this graphic design thing," my father started after ordering. "Is it still going well? Do you have a backup plan?" "It's not a thing, Dad. It's my career, and yes, it's going very well. I have more clients than I can handle right now." "That's nice, dear," my mother interjected. "But is it stable? Your cousin Rachel just got a job with full benefits at an insurance company." I took a deep breath. "I have my own health insurance. I'm contributing to a retirement account. My business has grown every year." "Still seems risky," my father muttered. The conversation continued in this vein until I spotted a familiar face approaching our table. Arya, my childhood friend who had coincidentally moved to Seattle for graduate school 3 years ago, was walking toward us with a bright smile. "Paige and Mr. and Mrs. Wilson." "What a surprise!" she exclaimed. Arya had been my confidant during high school, one of the few people who understood my need to escape Millfield. After hugging me, she greeted my parents warmly. "How wonderful that you're here for Paige's housewarming. She's worked so hard for that gorgeous apartment. Everyone at the design conference last month was talking about her latest campaign." I shot her a grateful look as my parents straightened up slightly. "Design conference?" my mother asked. "Oh, yes," Arya continued smoothly. "Paige was a featured speaker. Didn't she tell you people were literally lining up to talk to her afterward?" For a brief moment, I saw something like pride flicker across my father's face before he masked it. "Well, that's nice to hear." After Arya left, the dinner continued more pleasantly with my parents, asking slightly more respectful questions about my work. I began to hope that maybe this visit could be salvaged after all. When we returned to my apartment, I excused myself to take a quick shower, feeling emotionally drained from the constant vigilance required around my parents. I took no more than 15 minutes, but when I emerged, I immediately sensed something was off. Several of my carefully arranged decorative items had been moved. The throw pillows on my couch were rearranged. And when I walked into my kitchen for a glass of water, I discovered the real violation. Every cabinet had been reorganized. My pots and pans, once arranged by frequency of use, were now stacked by size. The spices I'd alphabetized were clustered by type. Even my refrigerator had been rearranged with a note stuck to a container of leftovers. "This looked old, should probably throw out." "Mom, Dad," I called out, my voice tight with anger. They appeared from the guest room, looking completely innocent. "Did you go through my kitchen?" I asked directly. "I just tidied up a bit," my mother replied with a smile. "Your system wasn't very efficient. This makes much more sense." "I didn't ask you to reorganize my things," I said, working to keep my voice level. "This is my home, and I had everything exactly how I wanted it." "Don't be so sensitive, Paige," my father said dismissively. "Your mother was just trying to help." "I don't need that kind of help. What I need is for you to respect that this is my space organized the way I want it." My mother's eyes welled up with tears, a response I'd seen countless times when confronted. I can't believe you're getting upset over something so small. We're your parents. We're just looking out for you. The familiar guilt began creeping in, but I stood my ground. It's not small to me. It's about respect. Please ask before you change things in my home. Fine, my father said curtly. If you want to be ungrateful, that's your choice. They retreated to my office now, their bedroom, leaving me alone in my kitchen that no longer felt like mine. I spent the next hour quietly putting everything back in its place, fighting back tears of frustration. This was just the beginning of their visit, and my boundaries were already crumbling. The next morning, I woke early, hoping to get some work done before my parents emerged from my office. I had just settled at my kitchen table with my laptop when I heard the distinctive ping of a Facebook notification from my phone. Curious, I checked it and felt my stomach drop. My Aunt Susan, my mother's sister who lived in Portland, had posted, "So excited to see my favorite niece tomorrow at her housewarming. Thanks for the invite. Meredith." I stared at the phone in disbelief. I hadn't invited Aunt Susan or any other family members. My housewarming was planned as an intimate gathering of close Seattle friends, about 20 people who had supported me through the years. When my parents emerged from the bedroom, I confronted them immediately. "Did you invite Aunt Susan to my housewarming party?" I asked, showing them the post. My mother smiled brightly. "Oh, isn't it wonderful? When I told her we were coming for your housewarming, she was so hurt not to be included. She's only a 3-hour drive away after all." "And your Uncle Bill and Aunt Diane are flying in from Chicago," my father added. "They were planning a Seattle trip later this year anyway, so they just moved it up." The room seemed to spin around me. "You invited people to my party without asking me." "Their family page," my mother said, as if that explained everything. "You wouldn't exclude your own family." "That's exactly the point, Mom. It's my party, in my home. I get to decide the guest list." My father frowned. "Don't be selfish, Paige. Family celebrations include family. We're just trying to make your party special." By completely disregarding my wishes, I couldn't keep the anger from my voice now. "How many people did you invite?" My parents exchanged glances. "Just a few close relatives," my mother said evasively. "How many?" I insisted. 7 or 8, my father finally admitted. "All people who love you and want to celebrate your success." 7 or 8 additional guests might not sound like much, but in my modestly sized apartment, it would push the capacity well beyond comfortable. Not to mention that these were relatives I barely kept in contact with who knew nothing about my current life. "You need to uninvite them," I said firmly. My mother gasped, as if I'd suggested something scandalous. "We can't possibly. They've already made travel arrangements. Susan booked a hotel. Bill and Diane changed their flights." "This is completely inappropriate," I persisted. "You had no right to invite anyone without asking me first." "We were just trying to help make your event special," my mother said, tears forming in her eyes again. "Why are you so determined to push family away?" Before I could respond, my phone rang. The caller ID showed it was a client I'd been working with on a rebranding project, someone I was supposed to send revised designs to later that day. "I need to take this," I said, grabbing my phone. "But this conversation isn't over." I walked toward my balcony for privacy, answering the call as I went. "Hello, this is Paige." "Paige, you sound different," my client said, confused. "This is Paige's father," I heard behind me. I whirled around to see my dad holding my work phone, the one I'd left on the kitchen counter. "Dad," I hissed, covering my personal phone. "Hang up right now." He ignored me, continuing his conversation. "Paige is busy at the moment, but I'd be happy to help. Something about designs." I rushed over and grabbed the phone from his hand, mortified. "Lisa, I am so sorry about that. My father is visiting and answered my phone by mistake." I glared at my father as I finished the conversation, assuring my client that the designs would be delivered as promised. When I hung up, I was shaking with anger. "You answered my work phone. That is completely unacceptable." "You were busy on your other call," he said dismissively. "I was helping." That was a client, Dad, a professional relationship that I've worked hard to build. You can't just insert yourself into my business. My mother, who had been observing from the kitchen, shook her head. "I don't understand why you're so upset. Your father was just being helpful." "Because this is my life, my business, my home, and neither of you seem capable of respecting any boundaries I set." The day continued to spiral downward. While I tried to work at the kitchen table, my mother decided it was the perfect time to prepare dishes for the housewarming party, effectively taking over the space. "Mom, I've already ordered catering for tomorrow," I explained when I found her unpacking groceries. "Store-bought food for family, absolutely not," she declared. "I'm making my famous spinach dip and those little sausage rolls everyone loves. I've planned this party carefully," I insisted. "The food, the drinks, everything is taken care of." "Well, now it will be even better," she said, turning away to begin chopping vegetables. Meanwhile, my father had discovered my filing cabinet and taken it upon himself to review my financial documents. "Your investment strategy could use some work," he informed me after poring through my private records without permission. "And you're overpaying on your mortgage. I could help you refinance." By mid-afternoon, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Every corner had been invaded, every boundary crossed. My anxiety was reaching unbearable levels when I decided to step out for some air, telling my parents I needed to pick up a few things for the party. Outside, I called Natalie, my voice cracking as I explained the situation. "They've completely taken over, Nat. They've invited relatives I haven't seen in years. They're rearranging my home, answering my work calls, going through my files. I can't take another day of this, let alone host a party with them there." "Can you postpone the party?" she suggested. I considered it briefly. "No, I refuse to let them hijack this too. This celebration is important to me." "Then we'll run interference," she promised. "Jackson, Drew, and I will be there early tomorrow. We'll help keep your parents occupied and away from your other guests." Her support steadied me, and I returned to my apartment with renewed determination to stand my ground. But my resolve was immediately tested when I walked in to find my parents huddled over my work laptop. "What are you doing?" I demanded, rushing over to close the screen. "That's my work computer." "We were just looking at your website," my father explained unapologetically. "The layout could be more user-friendly, and some of your client work seems a bit experimental. Have you considered a more conventional approach? It might attract a broader client base." I stared at them in disbelief. After 7 years of building my reputation and business, they still thought they knew better than me about my own profession. "My experimental approach is exactly why clients hire me," I said through gritted teeth. "My website has won design awards. Please don't touch my work equipment again." The night before my party, I lay awake in my bedroom, the only space that still felt somewhat mine, though my mother had already commented that the bedding wasn't proper quality and offered to order better sheets. I texted Natalie, "I'm having a complete breakdown. They've taken over everything." Her response came quickly. "Hang in there. Tomorrow we take back control. Your apartment, your rules. And if they can't respect that, they can leave." Reading her words, I felt a surge of resolve. This was my home, my celebration, my life. Somehow, I had to find the strength to make my parents understand that. Saturday morning arrived with an unexpected sense of calm. I'd barely slept, but woke with a determination that surprised even me. Today was my housewarming party, my celebration, and somehow I would reclaim it. This resolution lasted approximately 30 minutes until I emerged from my bedroom to find my mother had completely rearranged the furniture in my living room. "Mom, what have you done?" I asked, staring at my sofa that now faced away from the view I'd specifically positioned it to highlight. This flow makes so much more sense for a party, she explained cheerfully. Now people can circulate better. My carefully planned aesthetic, the one I'd spent weeks perfecting, had been dismantled overnight. My modern minimalist space now resembled a traditional suburban living room, with conversation areas that blocked the natural focal points I'd intentionally created. Before I could formulate a response, the doorbell rang. To my relief, it was Natalie Jackson and Drew arriving early, as promised, to help with party preparations. "Wow," Natalie whispered as she surveyed the transformed living room. "You weren't exaggerating." Drew, ever the diplomat, greeted my parents warmly, while Jackson gave me a supportive side hug. "Operation Reclaim Your Space is now in effect," he murmured. "Just give us the signal." For the next 2 hours, my friends worked miracles. While Drew engaged my parents in conversation about his restaurant, skillfully keeping them occupied in the kitchen, Natalie and Jackson helped me restore some semblance of my original apartment layout. We couldn't move everything back without creating an obvious confrontation, but we made subtle adjustments that helped me feel like the space was mine again. As the official start time approached, I began to relax slightly. My catered food was being arranged beautifully, despite my mother's additions taking up considerable space. The wine was chilled, my playlist was ready, and my friends had promised to run interference between my parents and other guests. Then the doorbell rang again, and my stomach dropped as I opened it to find Aunt Susan, Uncle Phil, and their 2 adult children standing there with broad smiles and housewarming gifts. "Surprise!" Aunt Susan exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug that smelled overwhelmingly of floral perfume. "We couldn't miss our favorite niece's big day." As I mechanically returned the hugs and accepted their gifts, more family members arrived. Uncle Bill and Aunt Diane from Chicago. My father's sister Grace and her husband Tom. My cousin Rachel, the one with the stable insurance job, and her fiancé. Within 30 minutes, my carefully planned intimate gathering of friends had been infiltrated by family members I saw once every few years at best. They moved through my apartment with the comfort of frequent visitors, exclaiming over how cute my place was, in tones that suggested they found it charmingly amateur. "This is quite the starter home," Uncle Bill commented, emphasizing starter, as if it were obvious I wouldn't stay long. "Such a brave choice to live alone in the city," Aunt Grace added, patting my arm condescendingly. Throughout it all, my mother glowed with pride, not at my achievement, but at her successful family reunion orchestration. She guided relatives through my space, pointing out things she'd changed or planned to change, speaking about my apartment as if it were a joint project. My Seattle friends arrived amidst this family invasion, looking uncertain as they entered what had essentially become a Wilson family gathering. I introduced them awkwardly, trying to create some sense of the celebration I'd envisioned. It was when Ryan arrived that the situation reached a new level of mortification. Ryan lived 1 floor below me, and we'd been engaging in that delightful dance of mutual interest for weeks, exchanging longer than necessary conversations in the elevator, and finding reasons to knock on each other's doors. I'd been excited to invite him to my housewarming, seeing it as an opportunity to showcase my personality through my home. He arrived with a beautiful houseplant and a warm smile that momentarily made me forget the chaos around us. "Wow, full house," he commented as he took in the crowded apartment. Before I could respond, my father materialized beside us, extending his hand to Ryan with an authoritative air. "Harold Wilson Page's father," he introduced himself. "And you are?" "Ryan Chen. I live downstairs," Ryan replied politely. "Ah, a neighbor," my father said, maintaining his grip on Ryan's hand a beat too long. "What do you do, Ryan?" I tried to steer Ryan away. "Dad, we're getting drinks. I'll catch up with you later." But my father followed, launching into what could only be described as an impromptu interrogation. "What are your intentions with my daughter?" he asked after several pointed questions about Ryan's career and background. Ryan's eyes widened slightly, darting to me for help. Sir, we're just neighbors and friends. Dad, I hissed. That's completely inappropriate. Ryan is my guest. I'm just looking out for you, Paige, my father replied, unruffled. You've always been too trusting. I apologized profusely to Ryan after finally extracting him from my father's grip, but the damage was done. Our easy rapport had been replaced by an awkward tension, and he soon made an excuse to leave early. As the party progressed, I kept overhearing snippets of conversations that made my blood boil. Yes, we helped her find this place, my mother told one of my colleagues. She was going to choose something much less practical, but we guided her toward this neighborhood. In reality, they had never even visited Seattle until now, let alone helped with my apartment search. To another friend, my father commented, "We're so proud she's finally settling down. It was a rough few years, but she's finding her way." Such a relief she finally has a real home, my mother added. We were worried about her all those years in those tiny rentals. Each comment diminished my achievement, rewriting the narrative of my independence into a story where I was still the child being guided by parental wisdom. The final straw came when my extended family began presenting their gifts. Rather than the typical housewarming offerings of plants or kitchen items, they had brought things that made it clear they'd been misinformed about my situation. "This is to help with your down payment," Uncle Bill announced, handing me an envelope containing a check. "Your parents mentioned you might be stretching yourself thin." Aunt Diane chimed in. "We remember how hard it was buying our first place. So nice that your parents could help you afford this neighborhood." I stood frozen, the envelope in my hand, as understanding dawned. My parents had told my family they had financially contributed to my apartment purchase, when in reality, I had saved for years and done it entirely on my own. Looking around my crowded living room, I spotted my mother arranging a collection of family photos on my bookshelf, removing my curated art objects to make space. My father was in the corner, explaining to my friends how he'd advised me on the purchase process, taking credit for negotiations I'd handled myself. Something inside me snapped. I walked deliberately to the center of the room and cleared my throat loudly. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the anger coursing through me. "I'd like to make something clear." The room quieted as guests turned toward me expectantly. "I appreciate everyone coming today, but there seems to be some confusion. This apartment was purchased entirely by me without financial assistance from anyone. Every decision from the neighborhood to the negotiations to the decorating was mine alone." My mother's face flushed red. "Paige, there's no need to get into details with everyone." "Actually, there is," I continued firmly. "Because this party was supposed to be a celebration of my independence and the life I've built here in Seattle. A life that I'm proud of and that I created through my own hard work." I gestured around the room. "This apartment represents years of saving, of building my design business from nothing, of making my own choices. And while I appreciate family support, I don't appreciate having my achievement diminished or misrepresented." The room had gone uncomfortably silent. My family members exchanged awkward glances while my Seattle friends watched with a mixture of surprise and what looked like respect. "Paige, you're making a scene," my father said in a low voice, moving toward me. "No, Dad. You and Mom have been making a scene since you arrived. Rearranging my home, inviting people without asking, answering my work calls, criticizing my choices, and now taking credit for something that was entirely my accomplishment." My voice broke slightly, but I pressed on. "This is my home, mine, and I need everyone to respect that." My mother burst into tears, the familiar performance designed to shift attention and sympathy. "After all we've done for you," she sobbed. "This is how you thank us, by humiliating us in front of everyone." Several relatives moved to comfort her, shooting reproachful looks my way. My father put his arm around her, shaking his head at me with disappointment. "I think the party's over," he announced to the room. "Paige is clearly overwhelmed right now." Guests began awkwardly gathering their things, making quick goodbyes. My relatives left with stiff hugs and whispered comments about my outburst. My Seattle friends lingered, clearly concerned but unsure how to help. Natalie approached as the last guests were leaving. "Do you want me to stay?" she asked quietly. I shook my head, feeling utterly drained. "No, I just need some space. I'll call you tomorrow." As the door closed behind the last guest, I stood in my apartment that no longer felt like mine, facing my parents, who remained in the living room, my mother still sniffling dramatically. "How could you embarrass us like that?" my father demanded. "After we came all this way to support you." I looked at them, these people who had shaped my early life, but seemed incapable of seeing who I'd become, and felt a profound sadness beneath my anger. "I think we all need some time to cool down," I said quietly. "Please go to the hotel tonight. We can talk tomorrow." "We're not going anywhere," my father stated firmly. "We're your parents, and clearly you need guidance right now." As they retreated to my office, now firmly established as their room, I stood in the wreckage of my housewarming party, feeling more alone than I had in years, despite being in the home I'd worked so hard to create. The morning after my disastrous housewarming party, I woke to the sound of hushed voices and clattering dishes. For a blissful moment, I forgot the events of the previous day, but reality quickly crashed back. I pulled on a robe and ventured into my kitchen to find my parents already busy. My mother was cooking a full breakfast, having apparently gone grocery shopping while I slept. My father sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, spreadsheets displayed on the screen. "Good morning, sunshine," my mother said with forced brightness, as if the previous night's confrontation had never happened. "I'm making your favorite blueberry pancakes." Blueberry pancakes hadn't been my favorite since I was 12. "We need to talk about yesterday," I said, pouring myself coffee from the pot they'd brewed. "Yes, we do," my father agreed, looking up from his computer. "Your behavior was concerning, to say the least." I nearly choked on my coffee. "My behavior?" "The way you spoke to us in front of everyone," my mother elaborated, flipping a pancake with unnecessary force. "It was disrespectful and frankly embarrassing." "You told everyone you helped me buy this apartment," I pointed out. "That wasn't true." "We did help you," my father insisted. "Maybe not financially at the end, but we raised you educated. You gave you the foundation to succeed. Everything you accomplish has our contribution in it." It was a perspective I'd heard many times, this idea that parents eternally deserved credit for their adult children's achievements. I'd spent years in therapy unpacking this very notion. "That's not how it works," I said carefully. "Yes, you raised me, and I'm grateful for that. But my accomplishments as an adult are my own. And more importantly, this apartment is mine. You can't just come in and take over." My mother placed a stack of pancakes in front of me. "We're not taking over, we're helping. And honestly, Paige, I think you might need to speak with someone about these anger issues you're developing." "Anger issues?" I repeated incredulously. My father nodded gravely. "Your emotional outburst yesterday wasn't normal. I've been researching therapists in the area this morning. There's one who specializes in young adult transition issues who might be able to help you." The absolute audacity of this response left me momentarily speechless. Not only were they refusing to acknowledge their boundary violations, but they were pathologizing my legitimate response. "I don't need therapy for setting boundaries," I finally managed. "What I need is for you to respect my space and my autonomy." My mother's eyes filled with tears right on cue. "After all we've done, all the sacrifices we've made, we fly across the country to support you, and this is the thanks we get." Accusations and coldness. "Mom, I specifically booked you a hotel room. I asked you not to reorganize my apartment. I didn't invite extended family to my party. Every boundary I set you ignored." "Because they were unreasonable boundaries," my father cut in. "Family doesn't stay in hotels. Family helps organize. Family celebrates together." "I'm not asking you to leave Seattle," I clarified, trying to remain calm. I'm asking you to leave my apartment and stay in the hotel for the remainder of your visit. My parents exchanged a look I recognized from childhood, the one that said they were presenting a united front against me. We plan to stay the week, my mother announced. We have tickets to return next Saturday. My heart sank. A week? You never mentioned staying that long. It was supposed to be a surprise, my father explained, as if this made it acceptable. But given your current state, perhaps it's better you know the plan. I can't take a week of this, I said honestly. I have work commitments, client deadlines. I need my office back. You can work at the kitchen table, my mother suggested, exactly as they'd proposed when first commandeering my office. Or at one of those coffee shops you love so much. The circular nature of the conversation was making me dizzy. Every concern I raised was dismissed. Every boundary I attempted to establish was trampled. This isn't a negotiation, I said, finally standing up from the table. I need you to leave my apartment today. We can meet for dinners, do some sightseeing, but you cannot stay here. My mother burst into full tears now. Our own daughter is throwing us out. After we came all this way. My father put his arm around her. See what I mean about concerning behavior. The Paige we raised would never treat her parents this way. The Paige they raised had been conditioned to suppress her own needs to accommodate theirs. The Paige standing before them now was trying desperately to break that pattern. I'm going to Natalie's for a few hours, I announced, no longer able to tolerate the emotional manipulation. When I come back, I expect you to have moved to the hotel. I dressed quickly and left the apartment, ignoring my mother's sobs and my father's disapproving glare. Outside, I leaned against the building wall, taking deep breaths of the cool Seattle morning air. Natalie welcomed me without questions, setting up a workspace for me in her living room and keeping me supplied with tea and sympathy. By evening, I'd managed to complete some client work and calm down enough to consider returning home. Want me to come with you? She offered as I packed up my laptop. No, I need to handle this myself, I replied, though the support was tempting. They're my parents. My boundaries. When I unlocked my apartment door, I was surprised by the silence that greeted me. For a moment, I dared to hope that my parents had respected my wishes and moved to the hotel. Instead, I found a note on the kitchen counter. Out for dinner with Susan and Phil. Didn't want to disturb your work. Left some notes around the apartment with suggestions for improvements. Love, Mom and Dad. Suggestions for improvements. I moved through my home, finding sticky notes attached to various surfaces. This paint color is too dark. Consider proper curtains instead of these blinds. Medicine cabinet needs organizing. These towels are worn, time to replace. Each note was a small paper cut to my confidence, a reminder that in their eyes, my choices were provisional at best, subject to their superior judgment. My phone chimed with a group text from Aunt Susan. Lovely dinner with your parents tonight. Hope you're feeling better. Remember, family only wants what's best for you, even when it's hard to hear. Similar messages from other relatives followed, a chorus of people taking my parents' side without ever hearing mine. The narrative had been established. I was the ungrateful daughter having an emotional crisis, while my poor, supportive parents were enduring my irrational behavior. I sank onto my sofa, suddenly exhausted. The apartment I'd been so proud of now felt contaminated by their judgment, every corner marked with their disapproval. My phone rang, displaying my boss's number. Strange, considering it was Sunday evening. Hello? I answered cautiously. Paige, sorry to bother you after hours. She began, sounding uncomfortable. I received an unusual call today that I thought you should know about. My stomach tightened. What kind of call? Your father contacted me expressing concerns about your workload and what he called work-life imbalance. He suggested we might be overworking you and contributed to what he described as a recent emotional episode. The room seemed to tilt around me. He called my boss about my work schedule. Yes, and while I assured him that your work performance has been exemplary and your schedule is entirely self-determined as a team lead, I thought you should be aware. Is everything okay, Paige? I managed to respond professionally, explaining that my parents were visiting and overstepping boundaries, apologizing for the inappropriate contact, and assuring her that my work would not be affected. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. This was beyond boundary violation. This was active sabotage of my professional reputation. My parents had moved from rearranging my furniture to potentially damaging my career. That night, I couldn't sleep in my own bedroom. I lay on the sofa instead, staring at the ceiling, feeling utterly defeated. The apartment that had represented my independence now felt like a battleground I was losing. The next morning, I called the one person who might truly understand. Drew had mentioned growing up with similarly controlling parents and had established firm boundaries with them as an adult. They called my boss, I told him, voice cracking. They're sleeping in my office, criticizing every aspect of my life, and now they're actively interfering with my work. That's not okay, Paige, Drew said firmly. You know that, right? None of this is normal or acceptable. I know, I whispered, but I don't know how to make it stop. They're my parents. They've always been like this, and I've always eventually given in. But this isn't about redecorating your childhood bedroom, he pointed out. This is your home, your career, your adult life. The stakes are higher now. As we talked, Drew helped me see a pattern I'd been blind to. My parents' behavior hadn't changed, but the context had. What might have been dismissible as overprotective parenting when I was younger had become something more insidious as I established my adult life. They don't want you to be independent, Drew suggested gently. Independent means they can't control you. Every success you have on your own threatens their narrative that you need their guidance. The realization hit me with surprising force. My parents weren't just annoying visitors overstepping boundaries. They were actively working to undermine my autonomy because my independence challenged their self-image as essential authorities in my life. So, what do? I asked, feeling both enlightened and overwhelmed. You decide what you're willing to tolerate, Drew answered simply. And then you enforce that decision consistently and without guilt. As I ended the call, I felt something shift within me. The apartment I'd bought wasn't just a place to live. It was a physical manifestation of the boundaries I needed in all areas of my life. If I couldn't protect this space, what hope did I have of protecting my emotional and professional boundaries? I had reached the moment where I needed to decide, would I continue accommodating my parents' intrusions at the expense of my own well-being? Or would I finally make a stand that might forever change our relationship? After my conversation with Drew, I spent several hours at a nearby cafe, researching articles about adult children setting boundaries with parents. Each story I read resonated deeply, helping me understand that my struggle wasn't unique or unreasonable. I made 2 important calls, one to my building's security desk, explaining the situation and asking for their support, and another to Natalie Jackson and Drew, asking if they could be on standby for moral support. By mid-afternoon, I felt prepared for what needed to be done. I returned to my apartment to find my parents comfortably settled in my living room, watching TV as if they owned the place. My mother had rearranged my throw pillows yet again, and my father had his feet up on my coffee table, something I never did myself to preserve the wood. We need to talk, I announced, turning off the television with the remote. My father frowned. We were watching that page. This is more important, I replied, pulling over a chair to sit facing them. I've made a decision about the remainder of your visit. They exchanged glances, my mother already assuming an expression of preemptive hurt. I've booked you a car service to take you to the hotel I originally reserved. Your belongings needed to be packed and ready in 1 hour. My father's face darkened. Absolutely not. We're not going anywhere. This isn't a negotiation. I continued, my voice steadier than I expected. You will be leaving my apartment today. We can maintain contact during your visit through scheduled activities if you wish, but you will not be staying here. My mother's tears started on cue. Paige, how can you be so cruel? We're your parents. Yes, you are. And I love you both, I said honestly. But loving you doesn't mean letting you take over my life or disrespect my boundaries. Boundaries? Boundaries? My father said dismissively. This new therapy jargon is just an excuse for selfish behavior. I took a deep breath. It's not selfish to expect basic respect. Since arriving, you've rearranged my home without permission, invited people to my party without asking, criticized my career, and living choices contacted my boss behind my back, and consistently dismissed my feelings and requests. We're trying to help you, my mother insisted tearfully. Everything we do is out of love. I understand that's how you see it, I acknowledged. But your help isn't helpful if it ignores what I actually want and need. Real support means respecting my autonomy, not undermining it. My father stood up, towering over me in a posture I recognized from childhood disagreements designed to intimidate. We are not staying in a hotel when our daughter has a perfectly good guest room. This discussion is over. I remained seated, refusing to be physically dominated. You're right that the discussion is over, but not in the way you think. You have 2 choices: leave voluntarily for the hotel, or I'll be forced to have building security escort you out. You wouldn't dare, he sputtered, genuinely shocked. I've already spoken with them, I confirmed. They're awaiting my call. My mother's tears intensified. After everything we've done for you, all the sacrifices we made, this is how you repay us. It was the same guilt trigger they'd used throughout my life, but this time, I was prepared. I'm grateful for the good things you did as parents, I said calmly. But gratitude doesn't mean unlimited access to my adult life. Now, will you be packing, or should I call security? If you do this, you'll regret it, my father warned, his voice low. We can cut you off, you know. The threat was almost laughable. Cut me off from what exactly? I support myself completely. I bought this apartment without your help. I built my career without your connections. There's nothing you can withdraw that would affect my daily life. The realization seemed to hit him visibly, his posture deflating slightly as he confronted the reality of my independence. You've changed, my mother accused, wiping tears. The daughter we raised would never speak to us this way. You're right, I agreed. I have changed. I've grown up. I've built a life I'm proud of, and part of being an adult is establishing healthy relationships, including with parents. My father tried a different approach. After all we went through to raise you, the sacrifices we made, do you know what we gave up for you children? Your mother could have had a career, but she stayed home. I worked 60-hour weeks to provide for the family. It was a narrative I'd heard countless times, the scorecard of parental sacrifice meant to forever keep children in debt. I appreciate those sacrifices, I responded sincerely. But they were your choices as parents. They don't entitle you to control my adult life or disregard my boundaries. The standoff continued for nearly the full hour, a cycle of tears, accusations, guilt trips, and threats. My mother cried about family abandonment. My father questioned my mental stability. They both predicted dire consequences for our relationship. Throughout it all, I maintained my position with a calmness that surprised even me. When the hour was up and they had made no move to pack, I calmly picked up my phone. I'm calling security now, I stated. My father's face flushed deep red. You would humiliate us like that, have us escorted out like criminals. I'm enforcing a boundary you've refused to respect, I corrected. The humiliation is a consequence of your choices, not mine. Something in my unwavering resolve must have finally convinced them I was serious. After a few more minutes of protests and emotional appeals, my mother stormed into the guest room to begin packing, while my father stood in the living room glaring at me. "You'll regret this, Paige," he said quietly. "Family should come before your precious independence." "Family should support independence," I countered. "Real love doesn't require control." When their suitcases were finally by the door, I called the car service I'd arranged. The ride to the hotel would be awkward, but I refused to back down now. "We're still here until Saturday," my mother reminded me as they prepared to leave. "We expect you'll come to your senses and apologize before then." I didn't respond to this directly. "I'll text you tomorrow about possibly meeting for lunch," I said instead. As the door closed behind them, I stood in the sudden silence of my apartment, emotions washing over me in waves. Relief, guilt, pride, grief, fear. But underneath it all was a profound sense of having finally stood my ground in a way I never had before. My apartment was still in disarray from their visit. Family photos they'd placed on shelves, rearranged furniture, notes stuck to surfaces, kitchen reorganized to their preferences. But now at least I had the space and autonomy to reclaim it. I spent that evening methodically restoring my home. I returned my furniture to its original positions. I replaced family photos with my chosen artwork. I reorganized cabinets according to my preferences. I threw away every sticky note with its passive-aggressive suggestion. By midnight, physically exhausted but emotionally lighter, I looked around my apartment that once again reflected my tastes and choices. There was damage to repair both to my space and to my sense of security within it, but I had taken the first crucial step. That night, I slept in my own bed, in my own apartment, on my own terms, for the first time since my parents' arrival. The victory felt both monumental and bittersweet. The month following my parents' departure from Seattle was a period of reconstruction, not just of my physical space, but of my sense of self and security. For the first week after they left, I maintained minimal contact, exchanging brief text messages, but declining their suggestions to meet before their flight home. The distance was necessary as I processed the emotional aftermath of our confrontation. My apartment required attention. Beyond the obvious rearrangements, I discovered numerous small alterations they'd made during their stay. Clothes refolded the right way in my drawers. Bathroom products reorganized by supposed frequency of use rather than my preferred arrangement. Books reshuffled to prioritize the few my parents approved of. Each discovery was like uncovering another small invasion, another reminder of how thoroughly they had attempted to impose their preferences on my space. The process of restoring my home became symbolic of reclaiming my autonomy. Meanwhile, my work had suffered from the disruption. The client whose call my father had intercepted expressed concern about confidentiality, requiring additional reassurance and relationship repair. My boss, though understanding, had questions about the unusual parental intervention. Projects had fallen behind schedule, requiring late nights to catch up. The most painful aftermath came in the form of messages from extended family members. Aunt Susan sent a lengthy email expressing disappointment in my treatment of my parents, filled with second-hand information and assumptions about the situation. Similar messages arrived from other relatives, creating a chorus of judgment based entirely on my parents' version of events. I didn't respond to most of these messages, recognizing that engaging would only pull me deeper into family drama that distracted from my healing process. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my professional confidence and personal sanctuary. 2 weeks after the confrontation, I began researching therapists who specialized in family dynamics. The recommendation had come from my parents as a way to fix what they perceived as my problem, but I recognized the value in professional support for establishing and maintaining boundaries. Dr. Margolis, A family therapist with experience in adult child-parent relationships helped me understand the deeper patterns at play. During our first session, I described the housewarming disaster and the lifetime of boundary violations that had preceded it. "What you're describing is a common dynamic," she explained. "Your parents built their identity around being needed by you. Your independence threatens that identity, so they respond by trying to create evidence that you still need their guidance and intervention." "But I don't," I said firmly. "I built this life without their help." "That's precisely what frightens them," she pointed out. "Their behavior isn't really about your apartment or your career. It's about their struggle to find new meaning in your relationship as you've grown into an independent adult." These insights didn't excuse their actions, but helped me contextualizing them. I wasn't dealing with simple rudeness or temporary overstepping. I was confronting a fundamental mismatch in how we viewed our relationship. 3 weeks after the confrontation, my mother called on a Sunday afternoon. Our recent communications had been stilted text exchanges, so the call represented a potential shift. "We've been thinking about what happened," she began, her voice carrying the slightly martyred tone I knew well. "We still think you overreacted, but we want to move forward." It wasn't an apology, but it was an opening. "I'd like that too," I responded carefully. "But moving forward means establishing clear boundaries." "Boundaries again," she sighed. "Paige, we're family. There shouldn't be all these rules and restrictions between us." "They're not restrictions, Mom. They're expectations for how we interact respectfully." The conversation continued in this vein, neither fully confrontational nor truly reconciliatory. But it represented a first step toward a new kind of relationship. During this period, I was surprised to receive a text from Ryan, my downstairs neighbor, who had witnessed the awkward father interrogation at my party. "Hey, I've been meaning to check in. That was quite a housewarming. You doing okay?" His message opened a door to a friendship that gradually evolved into something more. Unlike my parents, Ryan respected my space implicitly, always asking before even borrowing a book from my shelf. His natural understanding of boundaries made our developing relationship a healing contrast to my family dynamics. A month after the confrontation, I felt ready to host a small gathering in my apartment, a chance to reclaim the space with positive memories. I invited only my closest Seattle friends, creating the intimate celebration I'd originally envisioned. Natalie arrived early, surveying the apartment with an approving nod. "It feels like you again in here," she observed. "It is me again," I confirmed. "Every piece, every arrangement, every decision." The gathering was everything my housewarming should have been: relaxed, affirming, filled with people who supported my independence rather than questioning it. We toasted to boundaries and authentic relationships, celebrating not just my apartment, but the strength I'd found in protecting it. 2 months after the confrontation, I scheduled a video call with my parents. We had been communicating more regularly, though our conversations remained somewhat superficial, carefully avoiding the tender spots of our recent conflict. "We've been thinking about visiting again," my father mentioned casually during the call. "Maybe for Thanksgiving." I took a deep breath, recognizing the critical moment. "I'd be open to that," I said, "but we would need to agree on some guidelines first. You would stay at a hotel. Visits to my apartment would be by invitation. No rearranging, reorganizing, or criticizing my space or choices." My mother's expression tightened. "That sounds very cold and formal for family." "It's not about being cold," I explained. "It's about respecting that this is my home and my life. I value our relationship, but it needs to be based on mutual respect." "We'll think about it," my father said, clearly not entirely convinced, but not dismissing the idea outright either. The call ended without resolution, but I felt proud of articulating my needs clearly, without being drawn into defensiveness or guilt. 6 months after the confrontation, I hosted a proper housewarming party, the celebration I'd originally envisioned. My apartment, now fully restored to my vision and enhanced with new art pieces I'd acquired, truly felt like my sanctuary again. Ryan, now officially my boyfriend, helped hang string lights on the balcony. Natalie arranged flowers throughout the space. Jackson set up a playlist of my favorite music. Drew brought an array of appetizers from his restaurant. As guests arrived, I felt none of the tension that had marked my first attempt at hosting. This gathering was entirely on my terms, filled with people who supported my independence rather than challenging it. During a quiet moment on the balcony, Arya joined me, wineglass in hand. "This place feels so much more like you now," she observed. "It is me," I agreed, looking out at the Puget Sound view that had first captured my heart. Every inch of it. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "watching you stand up to your parents inspired me to set some boundaries with my own family. I've always let them dictate my holidays, my career choices, even my dating life. But seeing you reclaim your space helped me realize I could reclaim mine too." Her words reminded me that boundary setting, though painful, creates ripples beyond our own experience. By refusing to participate in unhealthy patterns, we give others permission to do the same. That night, surrounded by friends in my reclaimed space, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been difficult, but necessary. I had not only protected my physical space, but established a new understanding of what loving relationships should look like. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Hope your evening is going well. Dad and I are thinking of visiting for Christmas, staying at the Hilton as discussed. Let us know if that timing works for you." The message represented a small but significant shift. They weren't asking to stay in my apartment. They were acknowledging, however reluctantly, the boundaries I'd established. I smiled and put the phone away, returning my attention to the friends who filled my home with laughter and respect. My relationship with my parents would likely always require vigilance and clear communication. There would be tests and boundary-pushing steps forward and back. But something fundamental had changed. My apartment wasn't just my space anymore. It was the physical manifestation of the boundaries I'd learned to create in all areas of my life. The walls that protected my physical self now had emotional counterparts, clear lines that defined what I would and wouldn't accept in my relationships. True love, I had learned, doesn't demand control or conformity. It respects autonomy, celebrates independence, and honors the person for who they are, not who we want them to be. And for perhaps the first time in my adult life, I felt truly at home, not just in my apartment, but in my own skin. Have you ever had to establish boundaries with family members who couldn't respect your independence? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need encouragement in setting their own boundaries. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, creating boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of self-respect that ultimately allows for healthier, more authentic relationships.